here, Associate Professor at Shoreline Community College. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about logical fallacies. And really the reason that I like to go over these is that a lot of the time in writing we're trying to follow a specific train of thought, and we're trying to get from A to B to C to prove something. So what we're looking at first is what a conditional statement is. And a conditional statement, it really follows this train of hypothesis, observation, conclusion. So, for example, my hypothesis is if I take the penguin's ice cream, it will be sad. My observation, I took the penguin's ice cream cone and the penguin is crying, and I'm going to conclude from that that the penguin is crying because I took its ice cream cone. So I've got a hypothesis, an observation, and a conclusion. You'll notice that this is actually very similar to what we talked about in class with the scientific method and how the scientific method applies to research papers. So what we want to think about is how one piece of evidence proves something else. And again, there's that hypothesis, observation, and conclusion. So things that are combustible catch fire. Paper is combustible. Paper will catch fire if I hold a match to it. Or if it is raining outside, we won't go out and play. It is raining outside, therefore we will not go outside to play. So I've got a hypothesis, I've got an observation, it is raining outside, and a conclusion. Then we will not go out to play. Now, something to remember is that the opposite isn't always true. So we could say, we are not going outside to play today. When it rains, we don't play outside. Therefore, it is raining outside, right? Just because we don't go outside to play doesn't mean that it's raining. There might be some other reason. So let's look at the logic here. So old men are often bald. That's my my basis. Joe is bald. Therefore, Joe is an old man. Well, those first two things might be true, but the third may not be. Joe may be a young man. Or, Michael's English 102 class is awesome. There are a lot of different English classes at Shoreline, therefore all Shoreline English classes must be awesome. And there are two different sort of logical fallacies going on here. We'll name them in a second. So when you think about logical fallacies, some of them are intentional, some of them are unintentional. It's kind of like plagiarism, right? Now there are lists and lists and lists and lists of logical fallacies. We're really just going to focus on 5, and it's because these 5 seem to come up a lot in student writing. So I just want to make sure that you know what they are so that you can avoid them in the future. And when you begin to think about it, how can you keep your thinking as logical and straightforward as possible, right? So the 5 that we're going to focus on are straw man, hasty generalization, red herring, slippery slope, and circular logic. So we'll go over all of the definitions here, and I've taken all of these definitions from logicallyfallacious.com, so you can always go and look there. So the first one's straw man. Substitutes a person's actual position or argument with a distorted, exaggerated, or misrepresented version of the position of the argument. So this happens anytime somebody hears your point of view and grossly exaggerates or misrepresents your argument, right? So if I said, I think it's silly that, I have to that they're no longer offering plastic bags at the grocery store, and somebody said, well, you must hate the environment then. So the two are not necessarily connected, and we've committed a logical fallacy because there may be any number of reasons why I have some weird like of plastic bags. Circular reasoning is our second one. That's any form of argument where the conclusion is assumed in one of the premises, right? It's kind of chicken and the egg, or begging the question. You're just spinning your wheels, going around and around. And we'll look at a couple other examples of this in the near future that I think will help clarify. Hasty generalization happens a lot, and we're all probably guilty of this one. It's kind of where stereotyping comes in, right? So this is drawing a conclusion based on a small sample size rather than looking at statistics that are much more in line with the typical or average situation. So if you think back to the example about Michael's English 102 class is awesome. There are a lot of classes at Shoreline, therefore they all must be awesome. That's a really small sample size. Based simply on my class, it'd be difficult to conclude that all classes are as awesome as mine. Red herring. So a lot of people get strawman and red herring confused. So we'll go over these two a little bit more. Red herring is attempting to redirect the argument to another issue that the person doing the redirecting can better respond, right? It's a deliberate diversion. This one is hardly ever done unintentionally, I think. I think it's almost always done intentionally. So this happens where we're having a discussion. I have a hard time maybe addressing what you're talking about, and I'm going to divert the conversation to something else that I can deal with a little bit better. And slippery slope, which I think is probably the funniest, probably the easiest to identify. A relatively insignificant first event is suggested to lead to a more significant event, which leads to a more significant event, and so on and so on. There are usually a lot of different events in this fallacy, and it usually is connected with something like the next thing you know, right? If I miss class today, I'm going to fail the test tomorrow. If I fail the test tomorrow, I'm going to fail the midterm. If I fail the midterm, I'm going to fail the final. If I fail the final, I'm going to fail the class. I'm going to fail out of Shoreline. I'm going to end up living underneath a bridge, selling my blood for money, whatever. Something like that. This rapid progression from like bad to worse to worse. Okay, so we will do a little bit more work identifying these in class. What we're going to look at here briefly are a couple examples. So these examples are from a book called An Illustrated Guide to Bad Arguments. Pretty fantastic. So here's the first one, all right? So we've got this little cartoon. The energetic, muscular, and colorful toucan was completely misrepresented by one of the artists. Later on, he showed his audience this painting and criticized how dull and lifeless the toucan had looked. Now, take a minute and think about it. I'm going to even use a little word process of elimination. It's not circular reasoning because we're not going around and around. It's not a slippery slope because it's not going from bad to worse, which leaves us with a little bit of thinking about, okay, what is going on here? So this one is actually straw man. And a straw man is caricaturing or misrepresenting something, right? Usually used to make something more absurd than it was previously. The next one here, so we've got this cat talking to a kitten, I assume, with our little turtle friend in the background. And the cat says, if you let a bully come in your front yard, he will be on your porch the next day, and the day after that, he will eat your babies. That is hopefully pretty identifiable as slippery slope. Things go from bad to worse and relatively quickly. The next one here, the little sea lion is saying, are you sure that I won't fall to the ground? And the older sea lion is saying, yes, little one, trust in the book. And then underneath it says, sea lion is always right. 1-1, the book according to sea lion. Hopefully, this one you can identify as circular reasoning. How do you know I'm not going to fall to the ground because I say you're not going to fall to the ground is circular reasoning. It's one that, as a parent, I use quite often. Why? Because I said so, right? And that's all the reasoning I need. Okay, so one last note here on straw man versus red herring, and again, we'll talk about these more and more. I strongly recommend that you get them really clear in your head because the quiz on logical fallacies is going to address this, where you're looking at situations in which a logical fallacy is being presented, and these are the two that are often mixed up. So straw man is a fallacy that intentionally changes the argument, right? So it's mischaracterizing or misdirecting the argument. A red herring changes the subject, so you can kind of think of it as going off on a tangent or changing the subject to something that is easier to address. There is another fallacy called non sequitur. That's like completely different topic. So All right. So I think that's it for logical fallacies. So there will be a quiz on these fallacies. It is a multiple choice quiz on Canvas. Go over these, make sure that you know each one and can identify a situation which might happen. Otherwise, good luck. I will see you in class. Stay tuned for the video on different models of argumentation, which I will try and put up by Wednesday evening.